What do celebrities Justin Bieber, Nick Cannon, Jack Nicholson, Tim Tebow, Celine Dion, and Ashley Bratcher all have in common? Their mothers said no to abortion and said yes to life. Today, there's an ongoing battle against the sanctity of human life, most especially towards the most vulnerable, a baby in the mother's womb. St. John Paul II calls this attack on human life the culture of death. As Catholic Christians, we can't stand in the sidelines anymore. We've got to step up, get out of our comfort zone, and be a voice for the voiceless. My name is Raymond Valdiente, host of the Reignite Your Faith series. My next guest, Abby Johnson, was a former director of Planned Parenthood in Bryan, Texas. However, through the endless prayers of people who stood outside the abortion clinic where Abby worked, and by the grace of God, her eyes and her heart were opened to the cold truth while helping in an ultrasound-guided abortion. And eventually, Abby left her position as director at Planned Parenthood. She's the founder of a ministry called And Then There Were None, which is the only ministry that helps abortion workers leave their jobs and find new ones out of the industry. Abby is a speaker and an author. Her best-selling book, Unplanned, was made a feature film that hit movie theaters last year in March 2019. Today, Abby shares her journey of faith and provides some insight how we can become more involved in the pro-life movement. I hope you enjoy this interview with Abby Johnson. Abby, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. It is an honor.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you so much. I know that you have 8 kids and a very tight schedule, so we'll get right into it. I wanted to ask, first of all, your experience last year with the whole Unplanned movie. How did that go about for you?
Oh, it was pretty much a whirlwind the whole year. I mean, we're almost at the year anniversary of Unplanned being released, which is crazy. I mean, in some ways it feels like it was just released, and in some ways it feels like 5 years have gone by because so much happened, you know, in that year. So, but no, I mean, it's been definitely an experience I'd never had before, you know, being involved with the film. But so many hearts have been changed. I mean, the stories just flooding in, people who went in to see the film that were pro-choice, who walked out pro-life, babies that were saved. I mean, and, you know, and that's why we did it. I mean, really just for conversion, so people would see the goodness of God, and so that they would see that conversion is real.
Yeah. And congratulations on such a successful film. I know that there's still goals to actually have this message go out internationally, correct?
Yeah, and we've been doing that. It's been many countries so far, and you know, we're hearing from places that we'd never even heard of before, contacting us saying,
wow,
you know, we want Unplanned in our country. So that's still happening. We're still working to get Unplanned all around the globe.
Beautiful. And we'll continue to pray for the message and that the movie will continue to touch hearts, which it has done, and the Lord has used that very well. So I want to talk about a little bit just about your backstory. You worked at Planned Parenthood for how many years did you work for?
For 8 years.
For 8 years. How was that experience working with Planned Parenthood?
You know, I really enjoyed my job. I mean, you know, for the first 7 years I was there, I mean, I believed that I was doing the right thing. I believed that I was helping women.
Yeah.
I didn't really, I mean, I would like to tell you that I was constantly in turmoil about my job, or, you know, feeling all of this angst about working there, but I really wasn't. I believed in what I was doing. It wasn't until that last year that I really started to question what was going on, some of the things we were being told. That was really when I think God was beginning to open my eyes to what was really happening there.
And so there were some experiences you had. I know that it was the ultrasound that kind of was like the breaking point, basically, that really opened your eyes. And there were people that were praying for you during your time that were working there.
Yeah. Yeah, they were outside of my clinic every day for 8 years. And, um, they would always say that they were praying for us. And, if we ever wanted to leave our jobs, they would be there to help us. And, I thought, okay, yeah, right. Like, that's never going to happen. I've never turned to someone in the pro-life movement. But in the end, I mean, those were the people I turned to, because I learned that this whole idea of tolerance doesn't really exist in the movement that I was a part of. We thought that we were the ones who were so tolerant and, so open to everybody. But in the end, when I made a different choice to not support abortion, they left me in the dust. And they said, well, then we don't want to have anything to do with you anymore.
Yeah. Just want to say thanks be to God that, through God's grace, you were able to have the courage to step out and leave you were such in a comfortable position, working at Planned Parenthood, and but you took the steps in the journey out. How was that transition going out for you?
Yeah, it was scary.
Yeah.
I had become this person, right? I had become this abortion clinic director. That's who I was in the community. That's who people knew me as. I was a very controversial figure in the community. I was comfortable with that. I was this self-proclaimed, feminist, the secular sort of feminist. And I just remember thinking, I don't know who I'm going to be if I'm not that person, because that's who I've been for 8 years. And those were important years of my life. I mean, that was, age 21 to 29. So these were sort of formative years, like in my adulthood, figuring out who I am and the course that my life is going to go. I mean, and so I thought that was scary, leaving that identity behind and having to start over at almost 30 years old. That was a little terrifying. And then, of course, not knowing where my next paycheck is going to come from, who's going to hire me, what am I going to do from here? That was scary too. But I was very fortunate because I was, raised in a church. I was raised, a Christian. And so I was raised believing that, God will help us, and that, he's not going to, if we're walking in his will, then he's not going to let us fall on our faces, that he's going to provide. And it may look like a lot of sacrifice, it may take a lot of sacrifice on our part, but he's not just going to let us fall. He'll be there to catch us. And so because I had grown up with that faith, even though I'd really walked away from my faith for those 8 years, because I had that foundation of faith, I really did trust God in that moment, in that moment of fear. And so I'm, always thankful to my parents for giving that to me as a young person, because that did help me take that step of faith and really have faith, that I would be supported.
Amen. Now, tell us a little bit how the transition from where you're at, you were a Baptist, and then you transitioned to the Catholic Church. How was that journey towards becoming Catholic?
Yeah, so I grew up Baptist, and then when I worked at the clinic, I started going to an Episcopal church because, Episcopalians their national doctrine is pro-choice. They support abortion. Everybody I went to church with, they were very supportive of my job at Planned Parenthood. So that was a comfortable place, for me to be while I worked there. Definitely. When I became publicly pro-life, I was kicked out of that church.
Oh.
So I was called in by our pastor and was basically told that I was no longer welcome in the Episcopal Church. And so I ended up leaving. And that was, that was crazy for me, because I thought, what? I mean, what? This is church. Like, everybody should be welcome
Yeah,
here,
it should be
right?
welcoming,
Like,
right?
who kicks out somebody because like they're pro-life now? Like, but that's the way it was, And again, it was this idea, like, we were this tolerant church, right? We welcome everybody unless you're pro-life. Then you're suddenly, not welcome. So it was definitely, that was an interesting time and transition. And then that was just another part of my life that I felt like I'm losing, right? Like, I mean, I knew that I could no longer worship there. I mean, if I'm honest, I was like, look, I can't, now that I'm pro-life, I can't go to a church that's pro-choice. Right. I knew that. But it was so disappointing to have my pastor say, you're not welcome here anymore because you believe life begins at conception. And so we were, at that time, we were really trying to figure out, okay, so what do we do now? What church do we go to? My husband grew up Lutheran, and I had grown to really love the liturgy of the Episcopal Church. And so we wanted to find a pro-life church that was liturgical. And you really only have 3 options, and that's Catholicism, Missouri Synod Lutheran, or Anglican. There was not an Anglican church where we lived. There was a Missouri Synod Lutheran. We went there, and we liked the church, but it just, we just didn't feel like this is home. And so we ended up going to a Catholic church. And really, we really just went because people kept bugging us. Our new friends that were pro-life, they kept bugging us about going to church. And so we were like, oh, fine, here we go. And so we went, and there was just something when we walked in and we sat in Mass that first time. I remember my husband and I just looking at each other and saying, something about this is right. And we didn't know at the time really what it was, but we just knew this, we want to keep sensing this peace, right, that we felt when we were in Mass. And so so once we told one of our new Catholic friends that, we were suddenly enrolled in RCIA. And and like all of our questions, all these questions that I had growing up as a kid, they were suddenly being answered inside the Catholic Church. And my husband read Theology of the Body and Humanae Vitae. And he came to me one day and he said, look, I've read these things and I believe that they're true. And he said, if the Catholic Church is right on these things, I believe that they're right on everything. And so I was like, okay. So I started reading. I read the Catechism like cover to cover.
Wow,
because that's just me. Like, I'm nerdy like that, And I started reading some encyclicals. I started reading like writings from the early church fathers, and I just realized that this is truth. It's not my truth. It's not your truth. This is truth. And this is truth that I wanted in my life. I needed it in my life at that moment. And so, so Doug and I actually entered the church together in Easter of 2012.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's been beautiful. I mean, people are like, people have asked, like, how has the Catholic Church been like healing for you guys? And honestly, I don't know that our marriage would have survived without the Catholic Church. Like, the healing that took place, the just the sacrament that marriage is, that you don't experience in other religious factions. It was just it was really beautiful, just to see how God could use so much of our brokenness and so much of our broken past and use that for something really beautiful, and help us understand that all the while, we were still in his hand.
Yeah.
Like we were, he was still in control. Even when we were making bad choices, he was still in control. And now he's able to use those parts of our life for his glory.
So it's been 8 years since entering the church. What's the one thing that you can appreciate most about being Catholic?
Oh, I mean, I guess the Sunday school answer is the Eucharist.
The Eucharist.
Which of course, I mean, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think probably for me personally, outside of the sacraments, which of course, I mean, that's like our lifeline,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, I think for me, the greatest gift that I have been given in the Catholic Church has been this renewed openness to life. Because, when we became Catholic, I had one child. I didn't think I wanted any more kids. Not when I became Catholic. When we started looking into the Catholic Church, I thought, well, this is it. Like, I just want one kid.
Yeah.
But then the more I really grew in my faith, in my Catholic faith, the more I longed to open myself up, to more children.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we wanted in our marriage. And so I mean, that's been probably the greatest thing that's happened to us because of our Catholic faith, is just this obedience of being open to life, but such a joy.
So from 1 to 8, congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been a little crazy, but it's been good.
I bet. I wanted to ask now, in regards to you, in your story, you also mentioned about how you personally firsthand experience having abortions yourself. You had 2 of them, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
What was the healing process like for you to heal from those abortions?
If I'm honest with you, I did things. I went through, post-abortion Bible study,
Yeah.
and that was good. And I memorialized those 2 children, and I have a plaque for them at the National Memorial of the Unborn in Chattanooga that's on display. And the hardest thing to heal from, though, was actually not my own 2 abortions. The hardest thing to heal from was the 22,000 that I participated in while I was at Planned Parenthood, because my own 2 abortions, those were mistakes. Those were terrible, selfish mistakes that I made. But it was a decision I made. The 22,000 were decisions that I made for someone else. And really just the manipulation and coercion that was used by me. That was the hardest thing to heal from. Plus the sheer number is so overwhelming. But it took time to heal from all of it. It didn't happen overnight. It took time. And I would wake up in the morning and I had to make a decision. And I would have to make a decision. Am I going to live in my past, live in that sin, the place that I can't change, the place where Satan wants me to live? Do I live there for the day? Or do I live today, in the present, in this gift that God has given me? Do I live for him? And, honestly, in the beginning, I messed up. There were days I messed up, where I was like, nope, I'm just going to wallow in self-pity, and I'm going to drink too much wine, and I'm going to be sad, all day. And that's going to be my life today, but eventually, after having much practice of choosing to live in God's faithfulness, I didn't have to make the choice anymore. It just was very natural, and it was what I wanted to do. And it came very easily. And then one day I just woke up and I didn't have to make the choice anymore. I just knew this is the person I want to be. This is where I want to live. And Satan didn't control that part of my life anymore because I had completely given it over to God. Doesn't mean that I don't, I mean, there are days when something will happen, for instance, where I'll remember something that happened in the clinic and I'm like, I can't believe that was the person that I was, right?
Yeah.
But I don't stay there.
Yeah.
I stay here in the present
moment. Amen. How can we as young adults become more involved in the pro-life movement? Because it's still a battle out there. What do you go out there and recommend to the young adults that are watching?
I always recommend that people take up some sort of devotion to the pro-life movement during Lent. So we always talk about giving up things for Lent. So that's fine. Give up whatever you want, right? But I always ask for people to take on something new that they haven't done before, maybe, or that they haven't done recently. So maybe it's going and praying once a week. Maybe that's part of your Lenten devotion is once a week going and praying in front of an abortion clinic. Maybe you decide I'm going to pray a rosary every day for women and the unborn. Whatever it is that we say we're gonna take on something actively in the pro-life movement, and that can just be part of our Lenten journey. Yeah. And a lot of times, what we do during Lent is supposed to change our life, right? So I remember one time I was listening to an old clip with Mother Angelica, and somebody had called in and they had said, I'm thinking about giving up coffee. What do you think? That'd be a real sacrifice. And she was like, don't give up coffee. That will make you a terrible person. You'll be grumpy all day. But she went on to talk about it. And she was like, look, Lent is supposed to be a time in your life where you reflect and you come out changed from it. Not that, I gave up candy for 40 days and now that Lent's over, I'm going to just gorge myself with as many lifesavers as I can, right? Like, that's not a changed life. So we should walk into Lent differently than what we walk out. Yeah. And hopefully walking out of it, we walk out better, more spiritually mature, with more growth. And so part of that, taking on some burden of the pro-life movement, whether it's volunteering for a pregnancy center, going and standing and praying outside an abortion clinic, doing something like that, you will find growth in those activities. And hopefully it will be something that you feel inspired. Once you take it on for Lent, you'll feel inspired to continue to take on those responsibilities even outside of Lent.
Right. For the young adults who think that maybe they could be passive in the pro-life movement, why is it so important for us to step up our game and be involved, especially nowadays?
Because 2,400 babies die every single day. Okay. We cannot be passive when innocent life is being lost. And our faith demands that we do something. It's not a suggestion. Being pro-life is a core tenet of the Catholic Church, a respect for human life from conception to natural death. That's part of who we are as Catholics, and we have to live that out in our lives every day. And there's too much at stake. Yeah. There's too many lives on the line for us to just sit back and say, well, I'll just say a prayer every once in a while at lunch for the unborn, or, I'll remember the unborn, when I go to mass on Sunday. Like, no, we have to do more. We have to be more public about our faith, because there is an outright attack on religious freedom and liberty in this country. And if we don't speak up, eventually you will be silenced. So we have to show the world that we're not going away. We're not going to back down from our faith. We're not going to be silent just because our faith makes someone feel uncomfortable. Often the truth makes others feel uncomfortable if they are running from the truth. That doesn't mean that we stop speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just encourage young people, look, it's your peers, it's your friends going out to have abortions. It's not my friends. I mean, I'm almost 40 years old. You're not going to find many 40-year-olds walking in to have abortions. It's people in their 20s and early 30s that are going in to have abortions. And if we're not speaking up, if we're not giving a voice to the primary victims of abortion, and that's the unborn, then who will? If not us, then who?
Amen. So it's definitely got to have a sense of urgency, and definitely to step up and really be a voice for the voiceless. I mean, one way we can do that is, we're coming up to it's 2020, and it's the elections coming up in November, and such a very touchy subject, especially amongst the Catholic circles, is our voting. And some people are on one side, just a one issue vote that we have to vote for life. And then other people who say, oh, you can't just vote for pro-life. You got to look at the other issues. What do you say to those who don't focus on the pro-life, and they look at other issues as the problem, and pro-life not really a big thing?
There's no other tragedy in human history that's taking 2,400 lives a day. And, yes, as Catholics, we are concerned about other social justice issues, but social justice begins in the womb. Without the fundamental right to life, which we don't have in our country, other rights are really secondary. The primary issue that we must consider when we vote is the right to life. And I believe that it's all very intricately connected. So I think that, if you just look at sort of the statistics and the history, when abortion was made legal, the supporters of abortion said, well, we need abortion because abortion is going to help poverty. It's going to help reduce crime. It's going to, all these things that ailed us in society. Abortion is going to fix it, right? Because we're going to be getting rid of the more undesirable people in our world. That has not been true. That has not been what we have seen historically over the past 47 years. Abortion did not solve the problem of crime. It did not solve the problem of child abuse. It did not solve the problem of poverty. Those things still exist. But what we did see was that human life, by and large, was completely, people were dehumanized. And we see in our society how you treat the most vulnerable among you, how you treat the most marginalized among you is going to filter out into other parts of our life. So, how you treat the children in the womb is going to affect how we treat others with respect. It's going to, I think one of the reasons that we have so many divisions in our country right now, whether it's racial division or divisions in social class or whatever it is because we don't have a fundamental understanding for the value of life. Because we have devalued the most vulnerable, the most marginalized in our society. So if you really want to bring healing to other areas, you've got to start with the most marginalized. And I believe that if we could start there, if we could start having just basic protections for the unborn in the womb, then we would begin to see other protections take place. We would start to see sort of a ripple effect where more and more marginalized groups of people, their dignity is restored.
Well, thank you for that, and we pray that, especially with the elections coming up, that people will make the right choice and the right vote. We'll continue to pray for that. If people want to get a hold of you, get more information, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can go to my website, abbyjohnson.org.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Abby, before I let you go, I just wanted to, what we do with all our guests is we do a flash questions just to get to know all our guests who have been here on the show. You ready?
Yep.
All right. If you could have a cup of coffee with one saint, who would it be?
Ooh, St. Mary Magdalene.
St. Mary Magdalene. Excellent. If you had the gift of bilocation, where would you bilocate to?
Right now, at this moment,
Yes.
probably on like a beach.
Come to LA or San Diego or Hawaii.
Yeah.
And my last question, if there's one public figure or famous celebrity that you could evangelize the pro-life movement to, who would it be?
Barack Obama.
Barack Obama. Excellent. And we'll continue to pray for you in your ministry, and thank you for all the hard work and the sacrifice and the courage to speak up and stand up for life. You're truly an inspiration to me and millions of others across the globe.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And to everyone, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode. God bless you.